Good morning, and thank you all for coming to this plenary session. Plenary session means you don't have to come, but we're welcome to have you here. Hopefully this will be an informative process. The purpose of this plenary session is twofold. One is to catch you up to date and report on the actions and activities of your standing committee over this past year in the management of the diocese and also in governing the transition process, and also to hear a report directly from the co-chairs of the nominating committee. And then I'll make some additional remarks about things that will be going on after the nominating committee process is complete. And we'll have a time for questions and answers after I get done speaking before lunch this afternoon. As you can imagine, 2017 has been a very busy year for your standing committee. I dare say somewhat busier than usual. I'd like to right now acknowledge and make sure you know and can identify the members of the standing committee so that you can pester them if you wish. And I would like to introduce them. First of all, I do want to acknowledge Reverend Simon Mainwaring, who was our president until June 30th, who left to take a position in the Diocese of Atlanta, Georgia, and he served us very well and capably during that 6-month period at the beginning of this year. I'd also like to acknowledge other members of the Standing Committee, and I'd like you to stand when I call your names. Brother John Charles Westaway. Brother John Charles will be completing his 4-year term on the Standing Committee this afternoon. but not yet. The Reverend Kathleen Kelly. Helen Ashleford. Helen here? Yes, Helen. The Reverend Gwen Lynch. Jose Joe Gamboa. And the Reverend Laura Sheridan Campbell. And we will be welcoming 2 new members, Carol Levine, who was elected yesterday as our lay representative, and you will be electing the clergy representative in your balloting this afternoon. When I agreed 2 years ago to be a nominee for election to the Standing Committee, I was told it's a boring job. Well, I have found that not to be especially true, especially as events evolved during the course of this year. So, during this past year, your standing committee has been called upon and carried on and performed our normal duties, which are set out in detail in the booklet that you have received, and I won't recount them in detail except to summarize and tell you since the last convention, the Standing Committee has approved 9 consents to bishop elections in other dioceses, 7 persons for candidacy and/or ordination to the clergy or the diaconate, 13 parish requests for lease or use of their property, 4 letters demissory and 2 licenses, 2 parish bylaw changes, 6 letters of agreement, and 4 resignations, additions to our own guidelines for approvals, and the appointment of a new chancellor and 5 vice chancellors. That's just our normal business. But more significantly, we have prepared and planned for and are in the process of carrying out plans for our transition following Bishop Math's announcement at the end of January that he'd be leaving our diocese for a position at the Virginia Theological Seminary. And since Bishop Math's actual departure on June 30th, the Standing Committee has, as was explained yesterday, acting as the ecclesiastical authority for the Episcopal Diocese in San Diego. Now, it's a fair question, and one that I have heard asked, and the question is, why is everything taking so long? Why is it so long to took so long to get a nominating committee in place? And why does the nominating and election process have to take so long? Well, the simple answer to that question, and one we've asked ourselves, but the simple answer is to do it right, it takes the time it takes. And I'd like to quote from the Ignatian spiritualist and philosopher Teilhard de Chardin, above all, trust in the slow work of God. We are quite naturally impatient in everything to reach the end without delay. We would like to skip the intermediate stages. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new. And yet, it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability, and that may take a very long time. And to give you an idea what we have been doing since the beginning of the year, in addition to our other duties, back in February we had a Zoom conference call with Bishop Clay Matthews of the Office of Transition Ministry, who instructed us that our first decision had to be whether the Standing Committee would retain ecclesiastical authority in the diocese during the transition period, or rather choose to cede that authority to a bishop provisional. After some debate and prayer and counsel, we elected to retain that authority. That decision was made principally with an eye toward maintaining continuity and building on the progress this diocese has enjoyed over the past decade. Having made that decision, we began the process of calling an assisting bishop and deciding how we would divide up the duties and responsibilities of managing this diocese between the assisting bishop, the Standing Committee, and the Executive Council. Our search, as you well know, with the help of the Holy Spirit, led us to call the Right Reverend Catherine Jeffers Shorey to be our assisting bishop. And I cannot overstate how thrilled and honored we are to have Bishop Catherine with us throughout this entire transition period. Amen. Our division of duties and responsibilities are set out in a detailed letter of agreement, which was signed last June. And in the 4.5 months that Bishop Catherine has been with us, she has been a steady guide, a friend, and a spiritual leader throughout the diocese. In the meantime, we were also tasked with doing a search for a consultant to guide us during the transition process. After interviewing 4 candidates, we chose the Reverend Ann Hallisey to be our transition consultant. Ann is the former Dean of Students at the Church Divinity School of the Pacific in Berkeley. She has guided several other dioceses through the nomination and election process, and also, coincidentally, she is the wife of the Bishop of Northern California. We have had follow-up meetings with the representatives from the OTM and with Reverend Hallisey to help chart our path for the selection of our nominating committee and to set a timeline for the completion of the nominating and election process. A copy of that timeline can be found in your packet in the booklet for the convention. I will say that already there have been a couple of changes that have been negotiated regarding the timeline, and we expect there may be more before the process is done. But if you look at the timeline, it will at least give you an idea of where we're going. And Ed and Pam, who are here from the nominating committee, will give you a more detailed explanation in their presentation here this morning. In going about the process of selecting members of the nominating committee, we tried to make the process as inclusive and accessible as possible. We ended up with 56 applicants from all over the diocese. The Standing Committee met for 2 full days in August, and with prayer and discernment, we put together the nominating committee with members who we think both represented the diversity of our diocese and possessed the requisite skills and knowledges to be effective members of this vital committee. We have selected 18 members to serve on the nominating committee, 9 clergy and 9 lay, and we believe that they are representative of the diversity that we are seeking as to gender, ethnicity, sexual identity, size of congregation, and geography. It was not an easy job to try to mesh all of that together and come up with the committee that we did, and we're very pleased and happy to have the committee together. It is a complex and lengthy and many-faceted task that is ahead of them, but they have already launched into that task with great gusto. And as they will tell you, things are happening quickly, and there will be listening sessions for all of you to have an opportunity to speak to the process very soon, the rest of this month. Ed Walsh and Deacon Pam Rieger have been named by the Standing Committee to serve as co-chairs of the nominating committee. And I'm going to invite them now to share with you insights into the work that they're doing, what's ahead, and the role that all of you will play in the nominating process. Okay?
First of all, I want to welcome all of you again, and good morning again, and thank Jim for his comments. And I'm Ed Walsh, and my partner in life is Pam Rieger. And to start off, I just was recalling our Eucharistic celebration this morning, and what came to mind is, as I look at all of you, we are all indeed one body because we all share one bread and one cup. And then I look at our mission of our standing committee and the process that we have, the path we have going forward. And I can assure you that your prayer is our prayer. Thy will be done.
I'd like to start off right now to introduce the rest of you to some of the folks that are here today from the nominating committee. Sorry, I'm bad at that. I'm going to start off today by introducing you to various members of the nominating committee that are here at convention today. So when I call your name, please stand and remain standing. The Reverend Joe Durbis, the Very Reverend Penny Bridges, Christopher Craig Jones, Butch Glosson, the Reverend Carlos Garcia, the Reverend Tom Wilson, Dave Cowles, the Reverend Janine Shannon, Debbie Kistler, the Reverend Paul Carmona, the Reverend Brenda Soul, Pete Glorio, and our wonderful chaplains, the Reverend Christina Borges and the Reverend Carlos Exposito. Three members of our nominating committee could not be with us today. That's Judy Burton, Chikako Miriam Sukada, and Leslie Keller. So those are the ones that are missing today. Now we're going to go over the retreat and orientation to the process that we attended. The retreat we had gave the nominating committee a good overall picture of the structure and process of the road ahead. Our consultant, the Reverend Ann Hallisey, introduced us to targeted goals and objectives within the outline process of the nominating committee.
Key functional areas were identified, and subcommittees were formed and began their activities at the retreat. We will describe a little bit later as we move forward in the presentation more detail about the subcommittees and their work.
At the retreat, we looked at targeted goals and objectives, and the nominating committee created a timeline to direct our work plan. The timeline will be discussed in looking at key milestones for 2018 in our presentation a little bit later.
Actually, I'm going to go backwards a little bit to Jim's reference to the length of time it takes, and it takes what it takes kind of thing. I'm a social worker by background, working with older adults for many years, and in the most recent years, we've developed what we call evidence-based practice. And that helped me to understand the process. At first glance, it appears it is rather lengthy and maybe even cumbersome. But when you delve underneath that, you can see the reason. And just a couple of examples from evidence-based practice that is tried and true. Transition care. So if you provide certain interventions at discharge from a hospital, you can be assured that you'll have better outcomes, you'll have better management of chronic disease, and you'll reduce rehospitalizations. Another one is falls prevention. There's prescribed exercise, balance, and so forth, balance strengthening. If you do this, you will have a reduction in falls. So those are just two examples that kind of help me to understand. And the bottom line with evidence-based practice is you must have fidelity to the process. If you don't have fidelity to the process and you start tinkering with things and doing things differently, it doesn't work. You kind of lose your evidence-based outcomes. Then looking at our nominating committee process, it's very similar. We have a structured process. It's a lengthy process, but it's a structured process. It's tried and true. It's been used in dioceses across the United States. It's been tweaked and changed a little bit by seasoned experts in the field, and we know that we will have positive outcomes. In addition to the structure and the logistics of the process, we have two dedicated chaplains with us. We have the power of prayer. We have a dynamite consultant, and we have the call of the Spirit within our midst. So we can't help but have positive outcomes if we have fidelity to that process. Okay, here we have the 5 subcommittees that were identified at the retreat, and in case you haven't had the opportunity to read the Episcopal post online, and we would encourage all of you to do that, exciting information there, we will describe the work of the subcommittees now.
The first committee, the Education and Communication Committee, provides document sharing, calendaring, web page content, and online interview facilities for use by the nominating committee. The team will also develop and distribute education material on the role of the bishop, history of the diocese, how a bishop is elected, and the ordination of a bishop. The communication team will also provide details on the nominating process and regular subcommittee progress reports. All diocesan-wide communication will be sent by this subcommittee to the standing committee, who then distributes it.
And if you've been looking at the online post, that committee has been very busy. Next, we have the Listening and Survey Committee, and I bet many of you sitting here today have been touched by that committee already. This team will plan, develop, schedule, and coordinate all listening session town halls and surveys throughout the diocese to collect the needs, concerns, and ideas for determining the next bishop.
The next committee is the Profile Development Committee. This profile team will develop and publish a profile of the diocese, and this profile will include such items as information from the listening sessions, history, financial overview, demographics, institutions, governancing structures, ministries, and then pictures of communities at work throughout the diocese.
Next, we have the Nomination and Screening Subcommittee. This team will organize the nomination and screening process, including recruitment of possible candidates. They will develop application forms, marketing and advertising material, and oversee the initial screening process of the applications received.
And finally, we come to the Interview and Discernment Retreat Subcommittee. This team will manage the standard and objective interviewing process, including initial application screening, second-round online interviews, petition candidate interviews, and the face-to-face discernment retreat. The subcommittee will coordinate the retreat for all attendees that includes the candidates, the nominating committee members, the consultant, and chaplains. In addition, the subcommittee will be responsible for identifying the location, scheduling, and booking of the event.
Next, we'll identify key milestones of the nominating committee for 2018. There we go. And the first part, the team really got together and established, this really started at the retreat even, establishing the nominating process and the logistics, how we were going to get the work done, how we were going to plan our activities, and how we were going to navigate the path moving forward. And that will be completed by early January.
By mid-February, the completion of surveys and listening sessions will be done, and the completion of the profile.
By late February, we will post the profile online and begin accepting candidates' applications.
And the deadline for nominations and applications is in early April.
I feel a little bit like Cheech and Chong up here. Oh, I'm Cheech, I've been notified. Okay, back on course here. By late April, we will have the first blind paper screening. And what we mean by that, this is really essential, I think. What we mean by that, all identifying information that could bias us in the process of reviewing these paper screenings will be removed. Race, ethnicity, orientation, gender, etc., etc. That will be redacted and removed from the applications, and we will be reviewing the candidates' qualifications, regardless of those other pieces.
By late May, we will start online candidate interviews.
Moving forward in time here, early June, we will review all videos. All the nominating committee will sit and review all of the video interviews and have that completed.
By late June, we enter into the second screening of online interviews. This is where all nominating committee members will review and complete the complete footage of all the videoed interviews. And we will be agreeing on 8 to 10 candidates who will move forward in the process.
And then by late August, we will have completed the reference checks on all of the candidates.
And this includes the psychological, physical, and background checks, as well as the reference checks. Everything is done.
Okay, next, the nominating committee, the chaplains, the consultant, and 8 to 10 candidates will attend a discernment retreat in early October.
By mid-October, a decision will be made on 3 to 5 nominated candidates.
I need to go backward again, I'm sorry. But the retreat ends on October 4th, which is the Feast of St. Francis, and it's going to be an absolute success because of that, I'm sure of it. Then in early November, we will have the presentation of nomination committee, final slate to the standing committee.
And also in early November, the opening and closing of the petition period, 1 to 2 weeks by the standing committee is done.
And then by mid-December, completion of petition candidates' psychological, physical background, and reference checks, and a decision on the petition candidates will be made. Okay, we will now move to the walkabouts with the candidates and a special diocesan convention for election of our next bishop to occur early in 2019. The end.
Thank you very much, Pam and Ed, and we will have an opportunity for questions and answers when I complete these remarks for all of you. I do have one anecdote I'd like to share with you all. In late September, early October, my wife and I were vacationing in England and happened to take a trip on the 1st of October to Canterbury to go to the cathedral. And when we arrived at the cathedral as vacationers, we were informed that parts of the cathedral were closed because the primates of the Anglican Church were having their annual meeting. So we had the pleasure of attending evensong with about 30 of the primates of the Anglican Church, and I took the opportunity to introduce myself to Bishop Curry. I had a lively conversation with Bishop Curry, and he conveyed two things to me in that conversation. One, how blessed we were to have Bishop Catherine as our assisting bishop. And secondly, that he knew that we were going to have a wonderful slate of candidates for nomination for our 5th diocesan bishop. Now, there are two other things that I need to share with you about the process before it's all completed. Pam and Ed discussed with you the entirety of the nominating process, which culminates with their presenting a slate of 3 to 5 candidates to the standing committee acting on that presentation and announcing the candidates to the diocese at that time, which will be in early November, just before our next diocesan convention. Basically, the work of the nominating committee is over at that time. But there's a lot more work that still needs to be done, because we have to then carry the process through from the approval of the nominees through the election process and on ultimately to consecration. The work that will be required to be done during that period is done by what's called the Transitions Committee. That committee has not yet been selected, but we intend to do that forthwith. The Transitions Committee, and we'll be soliciting any and all of you to apply for membership on the Transitions Committee. The Transitions Committee has extremely important work to do during the period from the time that the nominations are accepted and the consecration of our 5th Bishop Diocesan. That involves such things as organizing and monitoring the electing convention, which should take place in late January or early February of 2019. Also to set up and manage the walkabouts, which Ed and Pam just described. The walkabouts are a week where the nominees who have been approved and selected and their significant family members will be here in San Diego to meet with as many of us as possible, clergy, parishioners, and delegates, to see us and for us to see them, and to ask important questions in advance of the electing convention. Then, once our next bishop is elected at the electing convention, the Transition Committee has additional responsibilities for that person's care and feeding during the period of time between the election and the consecration, which includes details of relocation and orienting them to their new office here in San Diego. Needless to say, this committee is vitally important to the success of the whole process. We have prepared an outline of qualifications and responsibilities of the Transitions Committee, and copies of that are available for you to pick up here today at lunchtime at the affinity table. It's a one-page pink sheet that designates the duties and responsibilities. Helen's holding up a copy of it, so feel free to pick up the duties and responsibilities of the Transitions Committee, and their qualifications are set out on that document. As I say, we have not yet begun the process of actually selecting that committee, but it's going to begin forthwith. The application period we intend to open before the end of this month, and then we'll be accepting applications for the nominating committee up until a date which we have not yet designated in early January. We'll close that period for nominations or applications for the Transitions Committee. The Standing Committee then will meet in January and actually select the members. The exact number of members of the committee is not yet determined. Like the Nominating Committee, the Transitions Committee will be broken into various subcommittees, so I expect that we'll have a Transitions Committee that will have somewhere in the range of 15 to 18 members to serve these important tasks. One other thing that I need to share with you, and that is, as we've indicated, the electing convention will take place the very end of January or 1st of February of 2019. So questions have been asked about, well, who will serve as delegates at this electing convention? And the answer is, pay attention to this, the answer is that the delegates that each parish or congregation elects this spring to serve as delegates for the next diocesan convention in November of 2018 will remain on duty and serve as electors at the electing convention in early 2019. So when you congregations set about to elect your delegates for the next cycle, 2018 diocesan convention, bear in mind that those people will also serve as electors at the electing convention in early 2019. Question's been asked, well, what about if we're a congregation that elects their delegates in early or mid-January before the electing convention takes place? The answer is, don't do that. So we are instructing congregations, if most congregations I think do it in February or March, but if you're a congregation that does it at your annual meeting, you don't have to do it at your annual meeting. We wish you to postpone the election of the next cycle of delegates until after the electing convention. Is that all clear enough? All right. All right. With that, I am opening the floor for questions. You can direct them to me or to Ed or to Pam or to Bishop Catherine or to Nancy, although Bishop Catherine and Nancy are really not in charge of this process. So feel free to ask any questions. Go to the microphone, please, and I'll recognize you and we'll proceed. All right, and as with our normal process, identify yourself and your congregation, please.
Joan Reese, St. Paul's Cathedral.
All right.
I have two questions. First, I want to thank you for a very clear presentation. It was very helpful and informative. The two questions that come to mind are, how does one do a psychological background check? And the other question that came to mind was, what is the petition period that the standing committee is given? What is that about?
Okay, I'll answer the second question first, if I understand the question about the petition period. After the slate is submitted to the standing committee, and the standing committee approves a slate of 3 to 5 candidates. Our canons, or the national canons, require that there be a petition period where other people can submit their names for consideration for election to the office of our next diocesan bishop. We're required to do that. It's required to be a 2-week period. So after we announce the slate, we will have a petition period open for 2 weeks where other people can submit their applications. And any of those people are subjected to the same kind of background check and the like. As to your first question regarding how is the psychological evaluation conducted, I can tell you a couple of things, and then I might actually call upon Bishop Catherine to add to that. I know that there are detailed questionnaires that each candidate must submit, and then I know there is a process for doing a psychological evaluation, but I don't know what that process is, and maybe Bishop Catherine can share a little bit about that.
The psychological evaluation is not unlike what all aspirants for ordination go through. It's a meeting with a licensed psychologist, and it's a meeting. The person who's chosen to implement the interviews and the review process is someone who's made familiar with the church's processes and what we're looking for. My understanding is that the process is designed to look for people with personality characteristics who would not be likely to thrive under the stresses of this particular office, if that makes sense. The background check is a different animal, and it looks for past history. The psychological review process will undoubtedly ask questions about a person's history, but the background check is a different piece. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize Paige Blair.
Good morning, Paige Blair Hubert, St. Peter's Del Mar. I have a question and an invitation. And the question is to unpack a little bit what steps our nominating committee will be taking to ensure that we have a slate as diverse as the Holy Spirit might call that slate to be. And the second is an invitation. My invitation is regarding my love for and care for the parishes in our diocese that have a different perspective on women's ordination than many of the other parishes in our diocese. I think of All Saints in Hillcrest, I think of St. Michael's in Carlsbad particularly, and my valuing and loving my brother rector at St. Michael's, and no doubt the one who will be called to be at All Saints. It's important to me that we have a diverse slate of nominees, and it's also important to me that we make sure that should a woman be elected bishop, and I'm grateful that we have Bishop Catherine here to give us a insight as to what that might look like. But if we do answer the call to elect a woman bishop, I would want us to make sure that that woman bishop would be a person who could work lovingly and closely and supportively with those congregations that might really wrestle with her ordination. And so my invitation is to my women clergy colleagues. And I want to invite you to pray about joining me when we have that walkabout season. If there are women candidates, and I sure hope there are women nominees, being women clergy who ask a question about that. Because I don't think we should leave it to our brother colleagues to ask a question about that. And so, women clergy colleagues, please pray if you'd like to join me in trying to keep this conversation and dialogue open, and when that time comes down the way, we can make sure that those questions are asked so that we stay whole as a diocese. Because I think we are strong as a diocese because of the diversity of theological perspective that we have, and I would hate to lose that. And so that's the invitation as well as my question. Thank you so much.
Good, thank you. And I can I can respond to your question at least as best I can as follows. The charge that the standing committee gave to the nominating committee, we're required as part of the process to give a charge to the nominating committee, and I have that in front of me, and it reads as follows. We charge our nominating committee with the following expectations in our search for the Diocese of San Diego's 5th bishop. The nominating committee will present to the standing committee a diverse slate of 3 to 5 candidates by a date in November 2018. Consistent with our baptismal covenant, we believe all are welcome in our church. Therefore, no candidate shall be excluded because of race, color, ethnic origin, national origin, sex, marital status, sexual orientation, disabilities, or age. Quoting from the National Canons, Title 3, Canon 1, Section 2. So that is our charge to the nominating committee. With respect to if a female were to be elected our next bishop diocesan, how that person would negotiate with certain of our parishes, all I can say is that our current assisting bishop will be here for the next nearly 18 months, and we'll be negotiating with all parishes and congregations in our diocese. She's nodding. So there you have it. Other questions? I'm amazed. So few questions. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, two things. One is lunch is going to be served at noonish. And secondly, as I said at the onset, please feel free to talk to members of the nominating committee that have been introduced, members of the standing committee. We want to be transparent in this process. We want to be as accessible as possible. I think you have all noticed that we have issued a series of communications from the standing committee, and now during this phase of the process, the nominating committee is sending out their episcopate posts, trying to keep you fully up to date with how things are proceeding. We want to make that very open and transparent to all of you. And if you have questions, feel free to contact us directly. Feel free to contact me directly. My email is scpresident@edsd.org. I'm happy to receive a communication if you wish, or try to get hold of Ed or Pam. So with that, what comments more?
Yeah, just real quick, and this is an advertisement for the listening sessions. And love the comments and the feedback that we heard this morning. Each of you will have an opportunity in a parish near you to give your input to those listening sessions. So think of what was brought up this morning and what's in your mind, what's in your heart of heart that you'd like to share, and please come forward and participate in the listening sessions. They'll be coming up throughout this month, and I think ending a little bit into December. So schedule one, put it in your calendar, and show up. Thank you.
I just want to add one more thing too, particularly thinking of Paige and her comments. Don't forget that we have clergy listening sessions slated. So please attend those, whichever's closest to your area. This is a voice that all clergy can have.
Yeah, I'll only add to that by my sort of last comment, meaning what, Mark, that you're not ready?
The petition will not be raised noon time, so if you want to take up the order of business before noon, go for it. Or you can just join the time.
Yeah, that's probably what we'll choose, but I did just want to comment that when we talked about setting the timeline for this process, we're aware of some people who have spoken on the subject and said, you really can truncate the process. You don't have to make it this long. And part of what they recommended was sort of doing away with these listening sessions, or even some people have suggested you don't even need a diocesan profile. People know who you are, candidates will apply, blah, blah, blah. You know, we feel it's essential for us to go through this process, to be able to fully identify who we are for ourselves and for the candidates that may apply, and to prepare a good and cogent profile that tells that story. And so that's the journey that we're embarking upon. At microphone 2.
Thank you. Mitch Bojarski, non-parochial clergy right now.
Sure.
Since we have a little time to kill, I would like to say that
I didn't invite killing time.
a lot of us had not had a chance to meet you or work with you at all, or Bishop Catherine, before these last couple days. And I think I speak for many, probably most, hopefully all in the room, to say that your leadership over the last couple days has helped assuage a lot of the anxiety that is present in a time like this. Yeah.
I didn't prompt that.
No, I didn't mean to either, but I'm happy to participate in it. I think when it was announced that Bishop Mathis was leaving, it felt like we would be a ship without a rudder, and I feel like we all feel like we're in very good hands, and so that it feels a lot better to let the process take as long as it takes when we feel like we're in good hands. So thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Are you two going to sing, or?
Honorable Sir,
Yes.
Laura Sheridan Campbell, Holy Cross Carlsbad, member of the Standing Committee.
Gwen Lynch, Grace San Marcos, member of the Standing Committee.
We joined together here also just to add to the wonderful presentation that has been made, that the first thing we did when we entered into this time of transition was to think about the chaplains and those who would be in prayer for this process. To that end, my friend Gwen had a wonderful idea, which I turned to Gwen to share with you.
We have assembled a corps of chaplains. How many?
About 16.
We have assembled a team of about 16 chaplains whose role during this transition period is to hold the diocese in prayer, to hold all aspects of the process in prayer. Their work has begun and is ongoing. David Tremaine is the lead chaplain for that effort. You heard that the Reverend Christina Borges and the Reverend Carlos Exposito are the chaplains for the nominating committee. As we assemble the transition committee, there will be people who will be assigned to that task as well. Others will hold all those who submit their names to the process in prayer. The nominees will be held in prayer. So the whole time frame is bounded by prayer for God's guidance and God's protection and for endurance.
Thank you. If I may make one further comment, that would be, as a member of the Standing Committee, and I only began last year, so I'm very new. I cannot speak highly enough of your Standing Committee, myself accepted. You know, one might think that when a process like this begins, that it's an opportunity for angst and conflict, and nothing could be further from the reality of our time together. Some of us are spending more time with each other than with our loved ones. And it has been a pure joy, a pure honor to serve this diocese in that way. We have learned to disagree well. We have learned to steep ourselves in prayer together. And I second what Father Mitch said. about our current leader. We are so blessed with Jim Steiben's leadership, and please hold him in prayer because he's carrying a heavy load but doing it so well.
Thank you.
For those who are chaplains and wondering how come we haven't heard from you, you will hear from us soon, and we will be drawing on your wonderful ideas and your spirituality to guide this process from the ground up. Thank you.
Keep praying in the interim.
Keep praying.
On microphone 2.
Penny Bridges, St. Paul's Cathedral, and member of the nominating committee. I heard around me a couple of people saying, what if somebody can't get to any of the 12 listening sessions, which are, by the way, open to everyone, not just delegates, but to every member of the diocese. And I know that we've set up an email address specifically for people to send their questions, whether or not you're attending listening sessions. And I know it's going to come, the emails are going to come to me, and I'm going to try and answer them appropriately or send them on to the right person. But I'm not sure yet what that email address is, so I'm asking our co-chairs or Hannah to say it for the convention. Is it epost@, or is there... It's epost@ESDS, EDSD.
I think Father listening over here has the answer.
Yes, so it's epost@edsd.org. And don't be shy. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Anybody else want to kill time? All right.
Jim?
Yep.
One short thought, given the questions about how long this takes. There's a wonderful African proverb that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone.
That's true.
If you want to go far, go in company.
Amen. All right, we'll recess until 1 o'clock. Our business session will resume at 1 o'clock. Lunch will be served shortly.
And just as a parting comment as you walk out, Gwen and Laura will be competing for the Cheech and Chong Award.